The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done. They killed Charlie because he preached a message of patriotism, faith, and of God's merciful love. But they should all know this. You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country and this world. You have no idea.
You know, my patience has really started to run out with this. At a certain point, it gets redundant to say over and over again. It is well established by now that the Charlie Kirk shooter, Tyler Robinson, appears to be a radical leftist motivated by radical leftist ideas. All of the evidence overwhelmingly points in that direction, whether it is the Antifa slogans written on the bullet casings, which seem obvious enough, or add in his family and friends coming out and confirming, yes, he had left-wing politics, or even the very fact that he shot Charlie Kirk, one of the top Trump supporters and right-wingers in America. Guys, this story is not all that complicated. And yet, as we have outrageously had to respond to, you've seen massive, thousands, millions perhaps, of claims by liberal, blue anon, delusional conspiracy theorists stating not only that, look, we don't really know what his motivations were, maybe let's wait for more information to confirm he was leftist. No, they're outright saying, based on nothing, and that is their argument, nothing, that clearly he must have been a white Christian conservative Trump-supporting Republican, and of course, logically speaking, that is why he would target another white Christian conservative Trump supporter, right? The very basis behind the conspiracy theory doesn't even make sense. But now they're shifting the goalpost. They're saying, oh, he must have been a far-right radical. Maybe he was a groyper. Which apparently, that's what far-right people are known to do. Far-right people, when they commit acts of extremism, are not going to write far-right slogans on bullet casings or a manifesto or something. They're going to write left-wing Antifa ones, right? On so many levels, the logic is freaking brain dead. I am so tired of even having to deal with it. Those people drove me up the wall yesterday, a little calmer today, but I gotta be honest, it's still utterly outrageous. But with all of that in mind, if you're still not convinced, if we have to continue to explain to people, newsflash, ladies and gentlemen, and I know this is going to shock everyone, we have even more evidence today pointing in the direction that indeed the guy was a leftist. I know, that's so crazy, right? Really briefly though, before we get into that, I want to remind everyone indeed that every single piece of so-called evidence that the guy was a Trump supporter or even a right wing or even a grape or any of these things that the left is spreading right now online is utter BS. First of all of these fake photos of, oh, he was registered to vote as a Republican. Not true. Debunked, by the way, by mainstream media, even liberal mainstream media. Just totally made up, photoshopped. The claim that he donated to Trump in 2020. No, that is a different donation of someone else named Tyler Robinson. CNN, I believe, was the entity actually that fact-checked that as well. The photo he posted, or the photo is being posted, I should say, of him wearing a Trump shirt. Photoshopped, yet seen by millions of people all over the internet. And even when you resort to the so-called media outlets, the big claim they're spreading, and we covered yesterday, let's just briefly respond to here again today, is this Daily Beast article out of the grandma who was interviewed, who basically said that the entire family around him were Trump supporters. And again, this has been the left-wing argument. Hey, if his family were all Trump supporters, how could he be different? Right? Because it's never once happened in the history of ever that a kid disagrees with his parents or has different views than his parents or rebels against his parents, completely ignoring the fact that most left-wingers who are psychotic and crazy like this disagree with their conservative parents. It's a story as old as Woodstock itself, okay? But just to clarify this once again, their big bombshell was that the grandma here, who goes by the name of Debbie, said the following, quote, "I'm just so confused. Tyler is the shyest person. He has never ever spoke politics to me at all." So their big grand source, just to reiterate, is someone who never once spoke politics with Tyler Robinson. The left is really onto something. As I said, the Sherlock Holmes level of investigation you're seeing right now online, where they're like, see, she never spoke politics to him. Look, I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said he was a right-winger. Clearly, that's the proof. That's all we need. Why don't we just do every court trial through ChatGPT? All of this nonsense. Well, again, guys, it's falling apart further here today, because we have more people who knew Tyler Robinson, further confirming he was not a Trump fan, he was not a Charlie Kirk fan, and he was a left-winger in terms of political affiliation. We have even new evidence out of, this is reported initially by Fox News, but I'd like to note for people who say, oh, it was Fox, I don't believe it. CNN and Washington Post both have interviews today further confirming the guy was an anti-Trump radical leftist. Okay, so we'll cover both sides of the story here just to show you, again, how overwhelming the evidence is. It is not ambiguous. It is not nuanced. It is not a both sides thing or we don't know. It is certainly not, oh, he's clearly a white Christian conservative. These people are just disgusting, utter liars. But that said, apparently we have new information today as well released that the alleged assassin was living with and likely dating a transgender partner. Needless to say, okay, again, the evidence is adding up more and more here. I think the story ought to be pretty obvious, but we'll get into it. Again, a lot more information to tell you about, more stories, more evidence. I can't wait for them to still turn around at the end of this video and say, Vince, you really made a good case. So what you're saying is he was a right-wing Trump supporter. Anyways, we'll get into it. Do us a favor before we get into it. Make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I'd like to thank everyone. We just hit 500K. I wish it came under better circumstances, but still, I want to show gratitude, of course, to the people who support this channel and make it all possible. So, again, thank you. Wish it could have been in a different situation, but my gratitude is still there for all of you who support us. And with that said, so I want to read you, first of all, an article out of CNN. Because yesterday, a lot of leftists are noting that essentially what we told you out of The Guardian, where they interviewed a former high school classmate that said the guy was like an anti-Trump leftist. The Guardian since retracted that article, not because it was false, not because the source was just like not a classmate or something, but basically their rationale was, oh, he couldn't remember other facts of their relationship together, so we're just going to write this off as not a reliable source. So it really begs the question to me, okay, if you didn't think he's a reliable source, why did you publish it to begin with? Really does feel like in that regard, they maybe did so under pressure, but you know what? That doesn't actually matter. Because we're going to show you here way more people corroborating the same exact story that he was indeed an anti-Trump leftist. So, that in mind, I want to read you today what CNN is talking about because I interviewed a couple people who knew Mr. Tyler Robinson here. And as you can see, this is what they're saying. People who knew Robinson described differing memories of his political leanings. An electrician who worked with Robinson on a job just a few weeks ago, for context, by the way, Robinson left Utah State University after one semester, went to electrician school, and now was working in that profession before today. And this is, again, just a few weeks ago, and asked not to be named. Like the others who spoke about Robinson due to the sensitivity of the situation, described his colleague as a shy presence who wasn't talkative unless he was spoken to, which is what the grandma says, which is what basically everyone says. He's this kind of like weird, socially awkward, very online type of kid. But here's what they also said, quote, Robinson didn't really talk political unless someone brought it up. Same thing, by the way, what the grandma said. So the leftists are going to keep citing the grandma. This is the same story, but wait a minute, go on. Adding that, quote, he wasn't too fond of Trump or Charlie Kirk. Isn't that interesting? Now, furthermore, I also want to show you both sides of the story because I'm sure a bunch of leftists are going to cling on to this one little line right here, but I read through it. I'm not hiding from it. I genuinely still think it backs up the same exact argument that no, it wasn't really he who was the conservative, it was the family that was conservative. But here's what someone else said, right? But several years ago in high school, Robinson, like his family, was politically conservative and supported President Donald Trump ahead of the 2020 election, one of Robinson's former classmates told CNN. And here is that actual quote. So, quote, when I knew him and his family, they were like diehard Trump, said the former classmate. When this happened, I was like, I don't know what changed. So I'd like to point out about that, first of all. I mean, he kind of keeps the who is the they here, right, a little bit ambiguous. But again, this is a reference truly to the family being Trump, right? He says him and his family, they were like diehard Trump. This guy never specifies whether he concretely remembers whether Robinson was pro-Trump. All it is that the family were pro-Trump conservatives, which is a well-documented fact by now, okay? So I don't see this as like a strong, concrete claim that contradicts everyone else who's saying he's an anti-Trump leftist, but I would further even say, okay, so what if he even did support Trump in 2020? Clearly, since then, he's been radicalized in a different direction, which is why he's writing anti-fascist statements on the bullet casings, right? Of course, people say, oh, but that can't be the case because the slogans are from video games. And only right-wingers, apparently only the far right likes video games, totally ignoring that Reddit exists, that Discord exists, that there's plenty of gamers on the left. And furthermore, I don't care if it's from Helldivers 2 or whatever, you still are writing that to send some type of message. What is so? You know, is the ultimate thing? Oh, he shot Charlie Kirk because he just thought it was edgy or a funny meme or something, right? I mean, they're not saying that explanation though. They're saying clearly he wrote this because he was far right, and that's why he was mocking and standing against fascism. Again, I don't know. But CNN is further pointing out here, in case anyone still has confusion about this, voter registration records show that Robinson is currently registered to vote unaffiliated with any party. Now, he was independent, basically, although he never cast a ballot, the Washington County clerk said in a statement. So this, again, further backs up the idea that he was a radical revolutionary leftist. Keep in mind, I don't know what other people are saying. I never once made the claim the guy was a quote-unquote Democrat. I said he was a radical leftist. Now, the very reason why Democrats have been so offended by this claim, they're getting so defensive, no, that's not us, is because of the fact that despite whatever statements they want to make about how they condemn political violence, or they're not actually extreme, they're not this party of radicals, there's a very close relationship between that radical, Antifa, communist, revolutionary socialist, all of those characters type of left, and the Democrat Party. The Democrats coddle these people. The Democrats welcome them into the tent. They work with them. First of all, for votes, but secondly, also because insane lunatics like this essentially act like, I guess, a left-wing version of the SS, I guess you could say, or let's say, you know, the Maoist Revolutionary Guard, or whatever you want to compare it to, right? Where essentially they're this paramilitary force that goes around intimidating the opposition, protesting, all that stuff, even in many cases committing direct acts of violence on their behalf, which, as bad as the optics may be, the reason why, again, Democrats are like, hey, that wasn't us, even though, again, I'm saying he was a radical leftist, is because the Democrats know they use and they weaponize the radical leftists. And then when, some person does something like this, they can say, well, plausible deniability. Like, those activists don't directly represent our party. They just quietly kind of do. Understand what I'm saying there? So, again, this actually further represents what I'm saying here. And again, Democrats, if you're not associated with these people, then why are you getting so defensive? Because you know you are, right? Anyways, the former classmate described Robinson as being, quote, very, very big into gaming and interested in video game design. Robinson and his friends would spend their lunches playing the card games and all that kind of stuff. I furthermore would like to state, ladies and gentlemen, it sounds like he was like a Dungeons and Dragons type of kid in high school, according to this claim. Now, we are generalizing here, we are stereotyping, but again, this much more matches the profile of a Reddit Discord style leftist kid, and my Gen Zers, people my age, will know exactly what I'm talking about, than the like far right edgy Nazi kid. Even the game he referenced, right? Helldivers 2, right? Much more likely you would think a far right winger would be referencing, I don't know, like Black Ops or Modern Warfare or something like that, right? It's, there's like a difference essentially between the COD kids and the Overwatch kids, okay? And older people are going to listen to this like, what the heck are you saying? The explanation here is not relevant. Just understand, okay? Not only is he like clearly saying leftist things and people are saying he's a leftist, he's exhibiting social behaviors that we can all confirm young people are associated with antisocial leftists, not antisocial rightists. Both exist, but again, the playing card games at lunch, okay, further goes in that direction. So, not a single piece of this profile is indicating that he's right wing besides his family being right wing. Even little things like this. It's very clear here, right, what is going on there. So essentially, there you have it from CNN. But I'd also like to point out the Washington Post, who interviewed another classmate here, confirming that it was a leftist who hated Donald Trump, saying during most of their high school tenure, President Donald Trump was in his first term, yes. Luke said that Robinson didn't like Trump, but also wasn't excited by Joe Biden, whose victory over Trump came during their senior year. Again, this is completely consistent with the idea that he was a radical, revolutionary leftist, right? He probably had beliefs, or at least a presupposition towards politics that was kind of outside the bounds of the normal system. Again, I never said he was a Democrat, but the reason Democrats, I should say, feel insulted by that accusation is because, again, they understand these types of activists are doing work on behalf of their party, and they don't want to admit that, their own base that they often weaponize against us could have done something or is actually violent, which they clearly are. I mean, look at Portland, Oregon on a normal weeknight, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about, because actually the protests there are still happening right now, right? But anyways, so you could look at this and say, well, that could prove two things. Either he's far right outside of the system or far left. Okay, fair enough. Here's the confirmation. Luke added that Robinson didn't like, quote, hateful people and people who would talk down about others. He was upset by figures who seemed like bullies, who voiced prejudices against people based on their race or sex, Luke said. Do I have to explain, or is this a leftist? Right? This is exactly the rhetoric of Antifa leftists. Needless to say, neo-Nazis, okay, are not against voicing prejudice based on race or sex. It's pretty freaking... No, clearly, guys, these are right-wingers. I saw someone today say that, a neo-Nazi would have called Charlie Kirk a fascist, and that's why he did it. I was like, do you even hear yourself? How do these people vote in our country? All right, they do. It is so obvious. If you were coy before, you weren't sure. Here's more evidence, right? Quote, we would have conversations every once in a while about our distaste about the way things had gone in the world, where people had become more hateful and our government hadn't been helping us as much. Robinson was quiet but passionate. Another confirmation of the same story, Luke said, quote, he was quite intelligent and would do well in school. I would say he was a good student. He would pay attention. He wouldn't talk a lot, but he wasn't super out of the way. He had friends going on here. He was very normal. And somewhere between the time span of 2020 and 2025, it appears his radicalization got worse and worse. I'm sure that, maybe leaving school, COVID lockdown, all that stuff, he just gets more into the Reddit stuff, more into all this online garbage and BS. And then, we obviously, it's not a big surprise as to what could have happened here. Again, he didn't like, in his words, hateful people who voiced prejudice based on race or sex. He wrote Antifa things there. Everyone is saying, not a Trump fan, leftist, etc., etc. How many times do we have to tell you the same freaking story? Again, this is from the Washington Post. So CNN, Washington Post, both two, at least liberal-leaning sources, if you don't want to say necessarily left-leaning sources, saying the same thing, corroborating the same exact story. And here is yet more information, ladies and gentlemen. You may have heard this today out of Fox News, but Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, while he was writing Antifa slogans on bullet casings, while he was trying to assassinate Charlie Kirk, while he, in his own, or at least secondhand, his own words, was talking about how he didn't like hateful people who had prejudice, apparently was living in, it would appear here, dating a transgender partner. Like, how much more obvious does this need to get? Like, who this guy was, what he was motivated by, right? So Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, was living with a transgender partner who was in the process of transitioning from male to female. A law enforcement source confirmed to the Post on Saturday. This is infamously something that far right-wing people do, I mean, I'm sure people can make jokes about, like the neo-Nazis, they're in the closet or something, but I'm not sure they'd be living with them, and this is like a known thing. It's again not complicated to understand. That individual, who is yet to be publicly identified by authorities, is now fully cooperating with the FBI on its investigation into the fatal shooting of the conservative activist, the source added. The relationship was first reported today by Fox News' Brooke Singman. According to public records, Lance Twiggs, 22, resided at the same address where Robinson lived. A relative of Twiggs confirmed to the Post on Saturday that, quote, yes, they were roommates. You can see here, this is allegedly Lance Twiggs, the man living with Tyler Robinson. And allegedly, this guy is transitioning, right? And you can see, right? You can see what's going on here. The family member who asked not to be identified said that Twiggs was the black sheep of their St. George, Utah family, but declined to speculate on a romantic relationship between the two men. So you're telling me that exists, by the way. You can have a black sheep in the family. Common denominator here between what appears to be two radical leftists. Now, here's the other point of interest. And I'm not accusing Lance Twiggs of anything because we don't know. This is what needs to be investigated, right? Did Lance Twiggs play a role in terms of conspiracy or helping to plot or encourage the assassination attempt? That's an open question. You may remember hearing in the press conference by Utah Governor Spencer Cox, I believe, what was it, the Friday morning? Yeah, that Twiggs, Thursday maybe? Friday. Yeah, Friday morning that Robinson, I should say, was apprehended and taken into custody. That there were basically Discord messages kind of documenting what was going on. And it included things like, hey, I dropped the gun in the woods. It's in a towel. Please come pick it up. Obviously, no one ended up doing that. But it would appear here, based on what we know, that very likely those Discord messages were being sent probably to his roommate and partner here, right, Lance Twiggs. And that's further the speculation going on. Again, this needs to be investigated. That's not corroborated, but it does seem to be a point of interest, and even including here with authorities. The family member said she didn't know about her relative's politics or whether Twiggs was transitioning to become a woman, but added that it would not surprise her. The family member said she knew Twiggs was brought in for questioning by police. Oh, and furthermore, according to the Daily Mail, their families, when asked, would refuse to deny that transgenderism could have been a motivating factor in the killing. Stands to reason, because it seems it was completely possible, right? Of course, we saw liberals going out yesterday saying, ha, you MAGA conservatives were wrong. You said it was a trans, and they actually weren't. First of all, I don't know when I ever said that. I don't even know when I even brought up the trans issue whatsoever. What I did speculate overall is that it was a leftist motivation. Now, the trans issue could be a part of that leftist motivation, but I don't know what that is supposed to prove. But now, here we have on these specifics, right? Again, all I said is generally. It seems to be Antifa, it seems to be leftist, anti-Charlie Kirk, whatever. Now, even on the specifics, you can no longer take trans off the table because they simply said, oh, the shooter wasn't trans, therefore it could have nothing to do with this issue. And then what do we learn today, right? So I hope that the investigation, assuming it is conducted properly, will, find out more and figure out and get to the bottom of the entire motivating factor here. But again, this is just yet more evidence pointing to the idea that the guy was leftist. If it wasn't clear enough before, here you go again. But don't you guys know, these are all things that right-wing MAGA supporters, even like far-right people, they all say this, right? They're all dating transgenders. They're all apparently, talking about how hateful rhetoric and how much they don't like Trump, and because they feel like Trump is a demagogue, they really care about anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-fascism. These are all characteristics of the political far-right, guys. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Just utterly brain dead. Okay? Well, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Are you surprised? Really not all that surprised. Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.